Good evening. Welcome to my channel, where today's apocalyptic missile threat transforms tomorrow's regional confrontation into existential battle. Iran possesses an estimated 1,500 ballistic missiles that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei will attempt to launch all simultaneously if the Islamic Republic believes its survival is at stake. This fundamentally alters the calculus of any American military action. Supreme Leader operating under use them or lose them, logic understands that American strikes will target Iranian missile launchers specifically to destroy retaliation capability. The rational Iranian response is firing every available weapon before American bombs eliminate launch platforms. 40,000 U.S. military personnel are scattered at bases across the Middle East, including Al Udeid, Qatar, 5th Fleet Headquarters, Bahrain, and multiple facilities in Iraq and Syria. All face saturating missile bombardment that Patriot and THAAD interceptor systems cannot fully stop when hundreds or potentially 1,000+ Iranian weapons arrive simultaneously from dispersed positions. Iran has pre-positioned missiles and delegated launch authority to local Revolutionary Guard commanders, who can fire without central authorization if communications get disrupted through American strikes, destroying command centers and leadership compounds. This creates a scenario where even decapitation strikes eliminating Khamenei cannot prevent missile launches from autonomous local commanders following standing orders. And critically, Trump faces 6 distinct strategic options that will define Iran's future. These range from limited symbolic strikes maintaining credibility without triggering total war, to comprehensive Gaddafi-style sustained campaign bombing regime into collapse, to even Maduro-style special operations, capturing or killing Khamenei personally if actionable intelligence about Supreme Leader's location becomes available. Each option carries different risk-reward calculus that White House recognizes includes potential for forever war entanglement that Trump instinctively opposes. Iranian resistance could create asymmetric response, dragging America into prolonged Middle East conflict President has spent years promising to avoid. But most strategically significant is Iran's unprecedented offer of oil riches to Trump. This represents complete reversal of Islamic Republic's founding doctrine, where oil nationalization since 1953, Mossadegh coup, has defined regime identity. Current proposal gives American corporations access to Iranian oil and gas fields guarded from U.S. involvement since 1979 revolution. This is either genuine attempt to create economic stakeholders preventing future American withdrawal from nuclear agreement, like 2018 Trump pullout, or sophisticated con game executed by veteran Iranian diplomats. Abbas Araghchi and team possess decades of nuclear negotiation experience facing off against Steve Witkoff, Trump's special envoy, who is a real estate investor with no non-proliferation background. This asymmetry means Iranian masters of deliberate ambiguity could craft language reading as concession in English, but preservation of capability in Persian. Oil offer potentially represents clever ploy to sign any deal averting Trump's military threats, then stalling until president leaves office in 2028, when more favorable administration might renegotiate terms. Let me explain why Khamenei launching all 1,500 missiles represents fundamentally different threat scenario than June's 12-day war, where Iran demonstrated restraint. During that conflict, when Israel began campaign, Iran's objective was keeping America out of fight. Khamenei limited retaliation to country bombing his territory by firing hundreds of missiles and thousands of drones at Israel. 36 Iranian missiles penetrated world's most sophisticated defenses, killing 33 Israelis and wounding over 3,000. When America entered war June 22nd by bombing Iranian nuclear facilities, Khamenei widened retaliation next day by firing missiles at U.S. Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. But Iran launched only 14 missiles in carefully limited operation, giving advance warning to both Qatar and America, inflicting no casualties. Khamenei's caution made sense because American goal was similarly limited to destroying nuclear plants rather than overthrowing regime. This calculation paid off within 24 hours when Trump declared war's end, imposing ceasefire on Israel. Iran's strategy of all-out retaliation against Israel but restrained response against everyone else was rational calculation that preserved regime survival while accepting nuclear program destruction. But this time, American strikes would not target already ruined uranium enrichment facilities at Natanz and Fordow. Instead, Trump's warplanes would wreck Iran's means of retaliation by destroying ballistic missiles and striking nerve centers and leadership of regime. Even if Trump's stated goal is not destroying Islamic Republic, but rather pulverizing Iran into agreeing never to rebuild nuclear program, those on receiving end unlikely to see things same way. Khamenei might conclude regime change is real objective and respond accordingly. America's inevitable strikes on Iranian ballistic missiles trap Khamenei in inexorable logic of use them or lose them. In white heat of crisis, Supreme Leader might decide restraint is pointless, because waiting allows American bombs to destroy launch platforms before they can be employed. Marcus Solers Hendricks, lead Middle East analyst at Greenmantle Geopolitical Consultancy, explains the calculation. If whole regime elite believes in fight for its life, then anyone still alive after first hit will rationally have every reason to strike back and try imposing maximum costs on Trump. Total missile launch is not irrational panic, but calculated decision to inflict whatever damage remains possible before American superiority eliminates all Iranian capabilities, leaving regime defenseless against follow-on operations pursuing comprehensive destruction. 1,500 missiles that survived June war losses still represent on paper enough firepower to inflict carnage across Middle East if all get launched simultaneously. Israel's evisceration of Hamas and Hezbollah cost Iran about half its ballistic arsenal and 70% of launchers, but remaining weapons are sufficient for devastating attack. 40,000 U.S. military personnel scattered at bases across region, all within missile range of Iran, become targets. Qatar, hosting Al Udeid, potentially receives far larger salvo than 14 missiles of June. Bahrain 5th Fleet headquarters faces bombardment. Iraqi and Syrian bases where thousands of Americans operate are vulnerable to strikes overwhelming point defenses through saturation. American embassies become obvious targets, though well defended, and Baghdad mission is accustomed to dealing with attacks. Saudi oil facilities, particularly Eastern Province fields and Abqaiq processing facility, handling 2/3 of kingdom's production, face potential destruction, driving global oil prices to catastrophic levels. Houthi rebels in Yemen retaining large arsenal of Iranian-supplied missiles previously launched at Saudi Arabia, and UAE could be urged by Khamenei to strike again. They might target U.S. Armada with advanced anti-shipping missiles Iran provided specifically for this purpose. Trump bombing Iran might find himself attacking Yemen simultaneously to neutralize threats from multiple directions. Naval wing of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps requires neutralization to protect U.S. warships and foil any attempt blocking Strait of Hormuz. This vital waterway serves as conduit for global oil supplies. IRGC intelligence branch believed to have planted sleeper cells of terrorists and saboteurs across Middle East and possibly Europe could be activated, creating distributed threat. Khamenei's problem is enemies know exactly how he might hit back. America and Israel would do everything within their power to preemptively defang Iran through strikes destroying missiles, launchers, command centers, and leadership before they can coordinate comprehensive retaliation. Iran has anticipated this by dispersing missiles and delegating launch authority to local commanders. Even if military headquarters get destroyed and communications disrupted, preventing transmission of orders, some missiles might still fire from commanders operating independently based on standing instructions. Trump's 6 options defining Iran's future represent spectrum from minimal to maximum intervention. Each carries different implications for American interests, Iranian regime survival, and regional stability extending far beyond immediate nuclear crisis. First option is military pressure alone without actual strikes. Iranian regime has rarely looked weaker after protests got crushed, nuclear program degraded, proxy networks decimated, and missile arsenal reduced. Show of might rather than force potentially sufficient to extract major concessions. Regime facing survival threat might countenance formally abandoning nuclear ambitions, dismantling proxies, surrendering remaining missiles, perhaps even sacrificing Khamenei himself to preserve system. This would hand Trump major foreign policy triumph without shot fired. But diplomats regard as unlikely because regime appears determined to resist rather than retreat. Second option is symbolic strike, maintaining credibility after setting red line threatening military action if regime continued killing protesters. This echoes 2017 and 2018 missile attacks on Syrian targets where limited strikes demonstrated willingness to act without triggering full war. U.S. forces might hit 1 or 2 high-profile sites like Thar-Allah headquarters in Tehran, IRGC command center seen as nerve hub of internal repression. Destruction would be celebrated by many Iranians representing low-cost, low-reward option, allowing Trump to claim keeping word while minimizing retaliation risk. But U.S. officials told Wall Street Journal this week that any initial smaller-scale strike likely acts as prelude to larger operation unless Iran gives up nuclear enrichment capabilities. Symbolic option potentially becomes first step toward escalation rather than final action. Third option is limited substantive action involving broader strikes over several days or potentially weeks. Targets include air defenses, ballistic missile launchers, communications infrastructure, energy facilities, and IRGC installations, including Basiji militia facilities responsible for protest violence. Objective creates conditions where Iranians might seize initiative themselves, allowing U.S. to facilitate rather than directly engineer regime change through supporting re-emerging protests that external pressure encourages. Risks are considerable because exhausted, traumatized protesters may not respond after Trump's change of mind hesitation. Strikes could rally population around regime, as happened during June's war. Many IRGC and Basiji facilities sit in densely populated areas, raising civilian casualty likelihood. Iran, retaining substantial missile arsenal despite June losses, could retaliate against Israel or Gulf states, creating regional conflagration. Fourth option is Maduro-style operation to capture or kill Khamenei, if Israel or U.S. acquire actionable intelligence about Supreme Leader's location. Trump was reluctant contemplating this last year when he stated during 12-day war, "We know exactly where so-called Supreme Leader is hiding. He is easy target, but we are not going to take him out, at least not for now." Such strike would allow Trump a Maduro moment, though on vastly greater scale than Venezuelan president's capture. But locating Khamenei may now be far harder because regime launched extensive counter-espionage purge after June war, arresting thousands and executing unknown number. Security around senior officials has tightened, with safe houses multiplied and Khamenei rarely appearing publicly. U.S. officials told Axios this week that any operation would probably resemble large-scale war rather than Venezuela Operation's surgical extraction. Even if successful, there's no guarantee successor would prove pliant or stabilizing. Fifth option is Gaddafi-style sustained campaign, escalating beyond limited action if initial strikes fail to produce desired results. Bombing regime until it collapses while providing support to protests. General Yossi Cooperwasser, former head of Israeli military intelligence research, states, if Iranian regime is removed, the reward for safety and security of world and Middle East particularly would be immense, justifying the risks. But risks are formidable because it took 7 months to topple Gaddafi. Iran, unlike Libya, has no organized rebel force advancing on capital. Prolonged campaign risks rupture between Trump and anti-interventionist wing of his base. Facing threat to existence, Iran could attempt igniting region by striking Israel, U.S. bases, naval assets, targeting Gulf oil facilities, or attempting to seal Strait of Hormuz, sending oil prices soaring and undermining Trump's domestic priorities. This explains why Gulf allies, despite warm ties with White House, oppose strikes resolutely. They refused allowing U.S. to use their territory, airspace, or waters for attack on Iran because they fear chaos or even civil war following regime collapse. One former Arab diplomat states containment may be safer than confrontation. Sixth option is Saddam-style ground invasion, which Trump almost certainly is not considering. Boots on ground would be most effective way toppling regime, but managing transition in Iran would be vastly harder than Iraq occupation that proved catastrophic. Iran is country nearly 4 times size of Iraq, with twice population and far more complex social fabric. Trump has been accused of bombast, but not even foes consider him gung-ho. Last thing he wants is another Iraq, though he may find that having ordered military action, he has stumbled into Middle Eastern entanglement he long swore to avoid. This tests his belief that wars can be won quickly, cleanly, on his own terms. New intervention may yet prove him right, but Iran could just as easily be placed where his foreign policy starts to unravel. Iran's unprecedented oil offer represents either genuine strategic concession or sophisticated deception, depending on whether regime means it or veteran Iranian diplomats are preparing to execute con game pacifying Trump while preserving capabilities through ambiguous language. Deputy Foreign Minister Hamid Ghanbari stated Iran formally proposed economic arrangements unthinkable even weeks ago. These include mutual interests in oil and gas, joint fields, mining investments, even aircraft purchases included in negotiation text. Oil Minister confirmed Friday that cooperation with United States in oil and gas sectors possible as part of nuclear deal. Proposal addresses what Iranian officials now acknowledge was fatal flaw in 2015 agreement. U.S. gained no economic benefits from compliance, making Trump's 2018 withdrawal politically costless at home by creating American corporate stakeholders with billions at risk if deal isn't signed or collapses. Iran hopes building domestic U.S. constituencies for compliance. This time, for sustainability of agreement, it is necessary that America also be able to benefit in areas with high and rapid economic returns, according to Ghanbari. While American companies were effectively locked out by sanctions under previous deal, Russian and Chinese firms expanded footprint in Iran, while European multinationals Total, Peugeot, Siemens moved in. This created dynamic where when Trump decided walking away, no U.S. corporate lobby existed to push back, and no constituency in Washington had billions at stake. Whether oil offer shows genuine Iranian intent is a different question entirely. Makeup of Tehran's negotiating team calls commitment into question, suggesting they might be attempting to deceive their inexperienced American counterparts. Oil offer might be an attempt by Iran to sign any deal, seeing off Trump's war threats and stalling until he leaves office 2028. Abbas Araghchi, foreign minister, and Majid Takht Ravanchi, deputy, are architects of 2015 agreement. They are veterans of years of technical negotiations with Western powers, among most experienced nuclear diplomats in the world. They sit opposite Steve Witkoff, real estate investor with no background in non-proliferation, whose previous diplomatic forays have drawn skepticism even from American allies. Asymmetry Iranian negotiators are well aware of. Historically, they have been adept at exploiting through creating deliberate ambiguity. They can craft language that reads as concession in English and preservation of capability in Persian. The 2015 deal itself contained provisions both sides subsequently interpreted in irreconcilable ways, with no obvious reason to expect that dynamic has changed. Compounding this is question of what Khamenei wants versus what he says publicly. On day Geneva talks were held, Khamenei threatened to sink U.S. aircraft carriers and declared Iran's missile program non-negotiable. Simultaneously, his foreign minister was in Switzerland offering American companies access to Iranian oil fields. Founding member of IRGC suggested Iranian negotiators would privately tell Witkoff to ignore Khamenei's public threats as domestic theater. They would tell him to say hi to Trump. These speeches are just for domestic purposes, according to Mohsen Sazagara. This contradiction is not new, but feature of how Islamic Republic has navigated nuclear diplomacy for more than 2 decades. Khamenei maintains revolutionary credentials publicly, while negotiators make pragmatic concessions providing plausible deniability if deal fails and ability to claim credit if succeeds. Iranian insiders who have been in room say Khamenei was personally briefed on every line of 2015 agreement, even as he publicly maintained suspicion of it. Same strategy appears in play now, where his repeated public appearances this week and threats to U.S. for domestic audiences show he feels emboldened. This potentially signals his negotiators are giving concessions in talks while he works to save face at home, which would be necessary because Iran's domestic politics make oil offer fragile. Oil nationalization is not just policy position in Islamic Republic, but foundational to regime's identity. Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh's 1953 seizure of oil fields from British control and CIA-backed coup that overthrew him for doing it seeded the grievance that drove 1979 revolution. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini built Islamic Republic on principle Iran would never again allow foreign powers to profit from its resources. Offering that same resource to American corporations would be single most potent weapon available to hardliners seeking to destabilize any agreement from within. Several reformist politicians who recently called for dialogue with West have already been arrested, proving political space for kind of deal Gunbari is describing as very narrow. USS Gerald R. Ford passing Gibraltar. Friday proves America's most powerful warship is approaching operational theater, but analysts calculate Ford will not be in position to strike until Tuesday next week, not this weekend. This gives Iran several more days for counterproposal to arrive and potentially avert military action. Ford's transit past Gibraltar confirmed, but continuing east at around 18 knots rather than maximum speed. Escorts would burn fuel very fast, keeping up with her, plus nasty weather and big waves in western Mediterranean currently mean punching into that at speed would break kit and people, leaving escorts behind unlikely when heading into potential shooting war since they provide vital protection for carrier. Assessment is Ford will be in eastern Mediterranean ready to do business early next week, creating timeline where shaping strikes could commence this weekend. But given risk of retaliation and how much time has passed anyway, why not wait until next week when everything is in place? Markets already getting jittery, with some commentators thinking weekend start likely so as to let people calm down before trading resumes Monday. Military assessment suggests Tuesday or later more probable once Ford reaches position, significantly adding to firepower provided by Abraham Lincoln in Gulf of Oman and many other U.S. assets in region. Strike options include limited approach possible this weekend without Ford involving targeted strikes on radar sites, command centers, leadership, or energy facilities. This provides benefit of surprise but leaves U.S. forces and allies vulnerable if Iranian response stronger than anticipated. More likely, Pentagon waits for Ford, then at time of their choosing, presumably in partnership with Israel, conducts sustained campaign lasting 7 to 10 days. They pursue whatever desired end states are, which is assumed to be regime change, though even that is not agreed across all relevant regional players. Main military uncertainty is Iran's potential retaliation. If mullahs make heavy use of mobile missiles, they could deplete U.S. defenses, such as Patriot and THAAD interceptor systems. Saturation attacks potentially manage hits on bases such as 5th Fleet Headquarters, Bahrain, and Combined Air Operations Center at Al Udeid. In full-scale scenario, if Iran launches all available missiles and drones and sends out all fast attack craft, submarines, and ships, it may manage inflicting serious losses on U.S. This could include sinking one or more warships, though probably not carriers, making stakes extremely high. Ford could continue out of eastern Mediterranean through Suez, joining Lincoln off Iranian coast in Gulf of Oman. Though operations from Eastern Med slightly more likely at present, providing benefits including faster arrival, creating multiple threat directions, providing defensive support for Israel, better access to northern target set like Tehran, and reduced risk to carrier herself. The convergence is complete. Khamenei's 1,500 missiles ready to launch all simultaneously if survival threatened. Trump's 6 strategic options defining Iran's future, from Symbolic to Gaddafi-style sustained campaign to Maduro-style Khamenei capture. Unprecedented Iranian oil offer that is either genuine economic concession or sophisticated con game by veteran diplomats deceiving inexperienced American envoy. Use them or lose them. Logic means any American strike triggers overwhelming Iranian retaliation, firing every available weapon before launchers get destroyed. 6 options all carry different risks with forever war potential Trump recognizes but may stumble into regardless. Oil offer destroys Islamic Republic's founding doctrine, making American corporations stakeholders in peace, or represents clever ploy, signing any deal to stall until 2028 when Trump leaves office. USS Ford, arriving Tuesday, not this weekend, gives Iran days for counter-proposal to avert strikes. 40,000 U.S. personnel in region face saturating missile bombardment that defenses cannot fully stop when regime fighting for survival launches everything simultaneously. This time, restraint won't feature in Khamenei's calculations, because survival at stake makes overwhelming force response the only rational choice for supreme leader. American goal appears to be regime elimination, regardless of stated limited objectives about preventing nuclear reconstitution. Iran understands this, making total missile launch not desperation, but calculated final strike, imposing maximum costs before American superiority eliminates all capabilities, leaving regime defenseless and doomed.